very chilly Estoril circuit in Portugal with a very special car, the Porsche Boxster 718 GTS 4 litre. Now, as you already know, the 4 litre denotes that this thing has a flat 6 engine in the middle of it here, and that means that it's got 400 horsepower, just 20 less than the Cayman GT4, with which this car shares more parts than you might expect. Now that engine comes mated as standard with a manual 6-speed gearbox. What a signal of intent that is from Porsche. There will be a PDK later, but right now it's all about the enthusiasts. And talking of what the enthusiasts want, you get as standard Porsche's 20mm lower than normal active suspension, 20-inch wheels, and a few bits of black trim all around. Looks fantastic, doesn't it? I mean, in this color it looks great. You can get it with silver wheels as well and it looks fantastic, but yeah, look at that. That just looks the part. We're gonna find out whether it drives as well as it looks, but quickly we can check out how it sounds. Just get a sound of this. This is what it's all about, right? Yep, let's take it for a drive. So here we are in the Boxster, and yes, the engine does sound every bit as good as we thought it would on the move. It's not quite as racy as the motor you'd get in the GT4, that's to be expected, but my God, in isolation, you really aren't feeling like you're lacking any sort of texture or tone from this engine. It just sounds so much more special than those 4 cylinders. But we shan't talk about the 4 cylinders again because it would just be too easy to directly compare. Apart from, I should note that this engine doesn't quite have the low down torque of the turbocharged 4 cylinders. That's to be expected, which means that when you are coming up behind cars and having to do overtakes, yeah, you've got to think a bit more. But that is part of the fun of this type of car, isn't it? That's what makes these cars so special. They are cars that need to be driven properly. And in the case of this engine, it's an engine that needs to be worked. And the gearbox at low speed, you know, driving around on these lovely Portuguese roads, it's just fantastic to use. I'm ashamed to say I've left it with the auto blip on just because auto blip is so good in this car. Manually blipping, the pedals are brilliantly spaced and the throttle is so quick and the engine so responsive that it's very easy to heel and toe compared to other cars. But the auto blip, yeah, it's just nailed as it is. So what's it like in terms of ride compared to the rest of the 718 range? Well, to be honest, on the smooth Portuguese roads we have here, it does ride pretty well. I will say that there is a harshness. We've got the damping set quite stiffly at the moment. If you click it back to the softer setting, yes, there is a harshness to the suspension. But a key thing to note is even with this Boxster chassis, without the lid on it like the Cayman, you don't notice any chassis flex, nothing of that sort. The Pirelli P0 boots are really quite sticky, but there's just nothing in the way of, you can't sense any kind of movement from the body, which is something we're used to now with Porsches. But even with this engine in the back being a little heavier as the 4 litre, which we should add is, it's a 4 litre, that's a pretty big engine for what is supposedly Porsche's entry-level sports car range. Oh, it just sounds so good, doesn't it? But the best thing about this package is that it just feels so cohesive, even with an engine that revs in the way that this engine does, and with a gearbox that's as tactile as this, the chassis remains equally as good, totally on par with the powertrain that you have here. It does not feel outshone. In no way do you feel with the addition of this engine that the progress made in chassis is not as good as what we have here with this engine. These 718s remain, as we know from the flat 4s, just sublime driver's machines. This is really the sort of car you would wake up early and go for a long drive in, particularly with this manual gearbox and this engine. Oh, and the balance is just brilliant. And it's the brake pedal feel, everything just feels exactly how you really want it for a sports car. It's very hard to fault these machines.
Okay, so perhaps it's not as supple as an Alpine A110, nor is it as compact, and at a few quid short of 66 grand, it's 10k more than even the A110S. But both the Boxster and Cayman GTSs are unique with their naturally aspirated 6 cylinders and manual gearboxes. Their biggest threat arguably comes from the full-blown Porsche Motorsport models that sit right above them, the Spider and GT4. But can you really sense the extra 10 or so % of performance those models have to offer? The best place to answer that question is, of course, the track, which is handy. because that's exactly where we're headed in the Cayman GTS 4 litre next.
Now, it's been greasy all day here at this Estoril circuit, a fantastic track in Portugal, but today's weather seems to have just eased off and now we've got some dry running. So let's see exactly what the changes with the chassis and this engine make on track. It's impossible not to think about that engine. That flat six the torque is obviously not quite as powerful low down as the 4-cylinder, but my God, on circuit, you don't care about any of that because you are just revving the hell out of this engine. Peak power comes in at 7,000 RPM, but it spins so freely all the way up to the 7,800 RPM red line. And the turn-in is just fantastic on the chassis. I must say as well that the carbon ceramic brakes, they really are great. There's feel from the pedal, they work from cold, but they are so powerful. We're following a 992 Carrera S, and I don't think this thing is that much slower. I'm sure we're talking a few tenths a lap rather than anything more than that. But just listen to this engine. That's a special sound. When you think of an Alpine A110, you think, oh yeah, that's supple, it's got beautiful balance, but this feels so much more exotic because of the tone of that 6-cylinder engine. The great thing about the balance as well is that there's a little bit of safety understeer, which allows you to then get onto the throttle nice and early to bring the balance back, so it's really confidence inspiring. Estoril's a really fast flowing circuit, and with a bit of downpour as well from earlier today, there are cars that would be much snappier, but you can just turn this thing in on the front, lean on that tiny bit of neutrality, and then just get straight back on the power. And that engine, it's zingy enough and it's quick enough to respond that you just find yourself prodding away and edging away at the limits. Oh, it's so addictive. I'm going to try and think of some bad things to say about the car. I'll come back to you on that one later, because right now, this thing is just addictive. Oh, the brakes, they are good. I must say as well, Porsche's professional pedalers up front in the 992 really do know how to get the most out of these cars, so it really does emphasize how capable this machine is, that we can just about hang on. There's that mid-corner neutrality and then squeeze back on the throttle. Really is so confidence inspiring.
It seems then that the 718 GTS 4 litres slot neatly beneath their Porsche Motorsport siblings to offer a little less ultimate performance but greater on-road usability, afforded by a slightly softer chassis and, in the case of the Boxster, that electric folding roof. There simply are no direct rivals, but that doesn't mean these GTSs win only by default. No, they also genuinely bring something new to the table that, at 64 and 66k apiece, can't be described as cheap, but certainly feels like great value. Nothing else at this price point feels quite so exotic.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and if you're pining for your own flat six experience, there are plenty of cars listed in the PistonHeads classifieds. See you there.